Quotations from The Second Ring of Power. When one has nothing to lose, one becomes courageous. We are timid only when there is something we can still cling to. A warrior could not possibly leave anything to chance. He actually affects the outcome of events by the force of his awareness and his unbending intent. If a warrior wants to pay back for all the favors he has received, and he has no one in particular to address his payment to, he can address it to the spirit of man. That's always a very small account, and whatever one puts in it is more than enough. After arranging the world in a most beautiful and enlightened manner, the scholar goes back home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in order to forget his beautiful arrangement. The human form is a conglomerate of energy fields which exists in the universe and which is related exclusively to human beings. Shamans call it the human form because those energy fields have been bent and contorted by a lifetime of habits and misuse. A warrior knows that he cannot change, and yet he makes it his business to try to change nevertheless. The warrior is never disappointed when he fails to change. That's the only advantage a warrior has over the average man. Warriors must be impeccable in their effort to change, in order to scare the human form and shake it away. After years of impeccability, a moment will come when the human form cannot stand it any longer and leaves. That is to say, a moment will come when the energy fields contorted by a lifetime of habit are straightened out. A warrior gets deeply affected and can even die as a result of this straightening out of energy fields. But an impeccable warrior always survives. The only freedom warriors have is to behave impeccably. Not only is impeccability freedom, it is the only way to straighten out the human form. Any habit needs all its parts in order to function. If some parts are missing, the habit is disassembled. The fight is right here, on this earth. We are human creatures. Who knows what's waiting for us, or what kind of power we may have? The world of people goes up and down, and people go up and down with their world. Warriors have no business following the ups and downs of their fellow men. The core of our being is the act of perceiving, and the magic of our being is the act of awareness. Perception and awareness are a single, functional, inextricable unit. We choose only once. We choose either to be warriors or to be ordinary men. A second choice does not exist, not on this earth. The warrior's way offers a man a new life, and that life has to be completely new. He can't bring to that new life his ugly old ways. Warriors always take a first event of any series as the blueprint or the map of what is going to develop for them subsequently. Human beings love to be told what to do, but they love even more to fight and not to do what they are told. And thus, they get entangled in hating the one who told them in the first place. Everybody has enough personal power for something. The trick for the warrior is to pull his personal power away from his weaknesses to his warrior's purpose. Everyone can see, and yet we choose not to remember what we see. Commentary. Years went by before I wrote the second ring of power. Don Juan was long gone, and the quotations from that book are memories of what he had said. Memories triggered by a new situation, a new development. Another player had appeared in my life. It was Don Juan's cohort, Florinda Matas. All of Don Juan's apprentices understood that when Don Juan left, Florinda was left behind to somehow round up the last part of our training. Not until you are capable of taking orders from a woman without detriment to your being will you be complete, Don Juan had said. But that woman cannot be any woman. It must be somebody special, somebody who has power, and a quality of ruthlessness that will not allow you to be the man in charge that you fancy yourself to be. Of course, I laughed off his statements. I thought he was definitely joking. The truth of the matter was that he wasn't joking at all. One day, Florinda Donna Grau and Taisha Abelar returned, and we went to Mexico. We went to a department store in the city of Guadalajara, and there we found Florinda Matas, the most gorgeous woman I had ever seen. Extremely tall, 5'11", lean, angular, with a beautiful face, old, and yet very young. "Ah, there you are," she exclaimed when she saw us. "The Three Musketeers, the Pep Boys, Eeny, Meeny, and Mo. I've been looking for you all over." And without any more to say, she took over. Florinda Donna Grau, of course, was delighted beyond measure. Taisha Abelar was extremely reserved, as usual. And I was mortified, almost furious. I knew that the arrangement was not going to work. I was ready to clash with this woman the first time she opened her daring mouth and came up with shit like Eeny, Meeny, and Mo, the Pep Boys. Unsuspected things that I had in reserve, however, came to my aid and prevented me from any reaction of wrath or annoyance. And I got along with Florinda superbly, better than I could have dreamed. She ruled us with an iron hand. She was the undisputed queen of our lives. She had the power, the detachment, to carry out her job of tuning us in the most subtle way. She didn't allow us to drown in self-pity or complaining if something was not quite to our liking. She was not at all like Don Juan. She lacked his sobriety, but she had another quality that balanced her lack. She was as fast as anything could be. One glance was sufficient for her to comprehend an entire situation and to act instantaneously in accordance with what was expected of her. One of her favorite ploys which I enjoyed immensely, was to formally ask an audience, or a group of people she was talking to, "Does anyone here know anything about the pressure and displacement of gases?" She would ask such a question in true seriousness. And when the audience responded, "No, we don't," she would say, "Then I can say anything I want, true?" And indeed, she would go ahead and say anything she wanted. She would actually sometimes say such ridiculous things that I would fall on the floor laughing. Her other classical question was, "Does anyone here know anything about the retina of chimpanzees? No?" And Florinda would say barbarities about the retina of chimpanzees. Never in my life had I enjoyed my time more thoroughly. I was her admirer and unbiased follower. I once had a fistula by the crest of the bone of my hip, a product of a fall that I had taken years before into a ravine filled with cactus needles. There had been 75 needles stuck in my body. One of them either hadn't come out completely or had left a residue of dirt or debris that years later produced the fistula. My doctor said, "That's nothing. It is just a sack of pus that has to be lanced. It's a very simple operation. It would take a few minutes to clean it out." I consulted with Florinda and she said, "You are the Nahual. You either cure yourself or you die. No shades of meaning, no double behavior. For a Nahual to be lanced by a doctor, you must have lost your power. For a Nahual to die fistulated, what a shame." Except for Florinda Donna Grau and Taisha Abilar, the rest of Don Juan's apprentices didn't care at all for Florinda. She was a threatening figure. She was someone who never allowed them the freedom that they felt was their due. She never celebrated their pseudo-exploits of shamanism, and she stopped their activities every time they strayed from the warrior's path. In the corpus of the second ring of power, that struggle of the apprentices is more than manifest. Don Juan's other apprentices were a lost lot, filled with egomaniacal outbursts, each one pulling in his own direction, each one asserting his or her value. Everything that took place in our lives from that time on was deeply influenced by Florinda Matos. And yet, she never took the front stand. She was always a figure in the background, wise, funny, ruthless. Florinda Donna Grau and I learned to love her as we had never loved before. And when she left, she willed to Florinda Donna Grau her name, her jewels, her money, her grace, her savoir-faire. I felt that I could never write a book about Florinda Matos, that if anybody ever did, it would have to be Florinda Donna Grau, her true heir, her daughter of daughters. I was, like Florinda Matos, only a figure in the background, put there by Don Juan Matos to break the loneliness of a warrior and enjoy my passage on earth. Quotations from The Eagle's Gift. The art of dreaming is the capacity to utilize one's ordinary dreams and transform them into controlled awareness by virtue of a specialized form of attention called the dreaming attention. The art of stalking is a set of procedures and attitudes that enables a warrior to get the best out of any conceivable situation. The recommendation for warriors is to not have any material things on which to focus their power, but to focus it on the spirit, on the true flight into the unknown, not on trivialities. Everyone who wants to follow the warrior's path has to rid himself of the compulsion to possess and hold on to things. Seeing is a bodily knowledge. The predominance of the visual sense in us influences this bodily knowledge and makes it seem to be I-related. Losing the human form is like a spiral. It gives the warrior the freedom to remember himself at straight fields of energy, and this in turn makes him even freer. A warrior knows that he is waiting, and he knows what he is waiting for. And while he waits, he feasts his eyes upon the world. A warrior's ultimate accomplishment is to enjoy the joy of infinity. The course of a warrior's destiny is unalterable. The challenge is how far he can go and how impeccable he can be within those rigid bounds. People's actions no longer affect a warrior when he has no more expectations of any kind. A strange peace becomes the ruling force in his life. He has adopted one of the concepts of a warrior's life: detachment. Detachment does not automatically mean wisdom, but it is nonetheless an advantage because it allows the warrior to pause momentarily, to reassess situations, to reconsider positions. In order to use that extra moment consistently and correctly, however, a warrior has to struggle unyieldingly for the duration of his life. I am already given to the power that rules my fate, and I cling to nothing, so I will have nothing to defend. I have no thoughts, so I will see. I fear nothing, so I will remember myself. Detached and at ease, I will dart past the eagle to be free. It is much easier for warriors to fare well under conditions of maximum stress than to be impeccable under normal circumstances. Human beings are two-sided. The right side encompasses everything the intellect can conceive of. The left side is a realm of indescribable features, a realm impossible to contain in words. The left side is perhaps comprehended if comprehension is what takes place with the total body. Thus, its resistance to conceptualization. All the faculties, possibilities, and accomplishments of shamanism, from the simplest to the most astounding, are in the human body itself. The power that governs the destiny of all living beings is called the eagle. Not because it is an eagle or has anything to do with an eagle, but because it appears to the eye of the seer as an immeasurable jet black eagle standing erect as an eagle stands, its height reaching to infinity. The eagle devours the awareness of all the creatures that, alive on earth a moment before and now dead, have floated to the eagle's beak like a swarm of fireflies to meet their owner, their reason for having had life. The eagle disentangles these tiny flames, lays them flat as a tanner stretches out a hide, and then consumes them. For awareness is the eagle's food. The eagle, that power that governs the destinies of all living things, reflects equally and at once all those living things. There is no way, therefore, for man to pray to the eagle, to ask favors, to hope for grace. The human part of the eagle is too insignificant to move the whole. Every living thing has been granted the power, if it so desires, to seek an opening to freedom and go through it. It is evident to the seer who sees the opening, and to the creatures that go through it, that the eagle has granted that gift in order to perpetuate awareness. To cross over to freedom does not mean eternal life, as eternity is commonly understood. That is, as living forever. Rather, warriors can keep their awareness, which is ordinarily relinquished at the moment of dying. At the moment of crossing, the body in its entirety is kindled with knowledge. Every cell at once becomes aware of itself, and also aware of the totality of the body. The eagle's gift of freedom is not a bestowal, but a chance to have a chance. A warrior is never under siege. To be under siege implies that one has personal possessions that could be blockaded. A warrior has nothing in the world except his impeccability, and impeccability cannot be threatened. The first principle of the art of stalking is that warriors choose their battleground. A warrior never goes into battle without knowing what the surroundings are. To discard everything that is unnecessary is the second principle of the art of stalking. A warrior doesn't complicate things. He aims at being simple. He applies all the concentration he has to decide whether or not to enter into battle. For any battle is a battle for his life. This is the third principle of the art of stalking. A warrior must be willing and ready to make his last stand here and now, but not in a helter-skelter way. A warrior relaxes and abandons himself. He fears nothing. Only then will the powers that guide human beings open the road for a warrior and aid him. Only then. That is the fourth principle of the art of stalking. When faced with odds that cannot be dealt with, warriors retreat for a moment. They let their minds meander. They occupy their time with something else. Anything would do. That is the fifth principle of the art of stalking. Warriors compress time. This is the sixth principle of the art of stalking. Even an instant counts. In a battle for your life, a second is an eternity that may decide the outcome. Warriors aim at succeeding, therefore they compress time. Warriors don't waste an instant. In order to apply the seventh principle of the art of stalking, one has to apply the other six. A stalker never pushes himself to the front. He is always looking on from behind the scenes. Applying these principles brings about three results. The first is that stalkers learn never to take themselves seriously. They learn to laugh at themselves. If they are not afraid of being a fool, they can fool anyone. The second is that stalkers learn to have endless patience. Stalkers are never in a hurry. They never fret. And the third is that stalkers learn to have an endless capacity to improvise. Warriors face the oncoming time. Normally, we face time as it recedes from us. Only warriors can change that and face time as it advances on them. Warriors have only one thing in mind: their freedom. To die and be eaten by the eagle is no challenge. On the other hand, to sneak around the eagle and be free is the ultimate audacity. When warriors talk about time, they are not referring to something which is measured by the movement of a clock. Time is the essence of attention. The eagle's emanations are made out of time. And properly speaking, when a warrior enters into other aspects of the self, he is becoming acquainted with time. A warrior can no longer weep, and his only expression of anguish is a shiver that comes from the very depths of the universe. It is as if one of the eagle's emanations were made out of pure anguish, and when it hits a warrior, the warrior's shiver is infinite. Commentary. It was a remarkable sensation for me to examine the quotations drawn from the eagle's gift. I felt immediately the hard coil of the intent of the shamans of ancient Mexico, working as vividly as ever. I knew then, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the quotations from this book were ruled by their wheel of time. Further, I knew that this had been the case with everything I had done in the past, such as writing the eagle's gift. And that is the case with everything I do, as in writing the present book. Since I am at a loss to elucidate this matter, the only option open to me is to accept it in humbleness. The shamans of ancient Mexico did have another cognitive system at work. And from the units of that cognitive system, they could still affect me today, in the most positive, uplifting fashion. Due to the effort of Florinda Matos, who engaged me in learning the most elaborate variations of standard shamanistic techniques devised by the shamans of ancient times, such as the recapitulation, I was able to view, for instance, my experiences with Don Juan with a force I never could have imagined. The corpus of my book, The Eagle's Gift, is the result of such views that I had of Don Juan Matos. For Don Juan Matos, to recapitulate meant to relive and rearrange everything of one's life in one single sweep. He never bothered with the minutiae of elaborate variations of that ancient technique. Florinda, on the other hand, had an entirely different meticulousness. She spent months coaching me to enter into aspects of recapitulating that I am to this day at a loss to explain. It is the vastness of the warrior which you are experiencing, she explained. The techniques are there. Big deal. What is of supreme importance is the man using them and his desire to go all the way with them. To recapitulate Don Juan in Florinda's terms resulted in views of Don Juan of the most excruciating detail and meaning. It was infinitely more intense than talking to Don Juan himself. It was Florinda's pragmatism that gave me astounding insights into practical possibilities that were not in the least the concern of the Nahual Juan Matos. Florinda, being a true woman pragmatist, had no illusions about herself, no dreams of grandeur. She said that she was a plower who could not afford to miss a single turn of the way. You must go very slowly, she recommended, and make use of every available item on the warrior's path. One of the most remarkable items is the capacity we all have as warriors to focus our attention with unwavering force on events lived. Warriors can even focus it on people they have never met. The end result of this deep focusing is always the same. It reconstructs the scene. Whole chunks of behavior, forgotten or brand new, make themselves available to a warrior. Try it. I followed her advice, and of course, I focused on Don Juan. And I remembered everything that had transpired at any given moment. I remembered details that I had no business remembering. Thanks to the work of Florinda, I was able to reconstruct enormous chunks of activity with Don Juan, as well as details of tremendous importance that had bypassed me completely. The spirit of the quotations from The Eagle's Gift was most shocking to me because the quotations revealed the profound emphasis that Don Juan had put on the items of his world, on the warrior's way as the epitome of human accomplishment. That drive had survived his person and was as alive as ever. Sometimes I sincerely felt that Don Juan had never left. I got to the point of actually hearing him moving around the house. I asked Florinda about it. She said, "Oh, that's nothing. It's just the Nahual Juan Mata's emptiness that reaches out to touch you, no matter where his awareness is at the moment." Her answer left me more puzzled, more intrigued, and more despondent than ever. Although Florinda was the closest person to the Nahual Juan Matas, they were astoundingly different. One thing that they both shared was the emptiness of their persons. They were no longer people. Don Juan Matas did not exist as a person, but what existed instead of his person was a collection of stories, each of them apropos to the situation he was discussing. Didactic stories and jokes that bore the mark of his sobriety and his frugality. Florinda was the same. She had stories upon stories. But her stories were about people. They were like a high form of gossip, or gossip elevated due to her impersonality to inconceivable heights of effectiveness and enjoyment. I want you to examine one man who bears a tremendous resemblance to you, she said one day to me. I want you to recapitulate him as if you had known him all your life. This man was transcendental in the formation of our lineage. His name was Elias, the Nahual Elias. I call him the Nahual who lost heaven. The story is that the Nahual Elias was reared by a Jesuit priest who taught him to read and write and to play the harpsichord. He taught him Latin. The Nahual Elias could read the scriptures in Latin as fluently as any scholar could. His destiny was to be a priest. But he was an Indian, and Indians in those days did not fit into clerical hierarchies. They were too awesome looking, too dark, too Indian. Priests were from the upper social classes, descendants of Spaniards, with white skin, blue eyes. They were handsome, presentable. The Nahual Elias was a bear in comparison. But he struggled long, kindled by his mentor's promise that God would see that he was accepted into the priesthood. He was the sexton of the church where his mentor was the parish priest. And one day, an actual witch walked in. Her name was Amalia. They say that she was a wild card. Be that as it may, she ended up seducing the poor sexton, who fell so deeply, so hopelessly in love with Amalia that he ended up in the hut of a Nahual man. In time, he became the Nahual Elias, a figure to reckon with, cultured, well-read. It seemed that the niche of Nahual was made for him. It allowed him the anonymity and the effectiveness that was denied him in the world. He was a dreamer, and so good at it that he covered the most recondite places of the universe in a bodiless state. Sometimes he even brought back objects that had attracted his eye because of the lines of their design, objects that were incomprehensible. He called them inventions. He had a whole collection of them. I want you to focus your recapitulation attention on those inventions. Florinda commanded me. I want you to end up sniffing them, feeling them with your hands. Although you never have seen them except through what I am telling you now. To do this focusing means to establish a point of reference, as in an algebraic equation in which something is calculated by playing on a third element. You'll be able to see the Nahual Juan Matus with infinite clarity, using someone else as a point of corroboration. The corpus of this book, The Eagle's Gift, is a review in depth of what Don Juan had done to me while he was in the world. The views that I had of Don Juan, due to my new recapitulation skills, using the Nahual Elias as a point of corroboration, were infinitely more intense than any views that I had of him while he was alive. The recapitulation views I was engaged in lacked the warmth of the living, but they had instead the precision and the accuracy of inanimate objects that one can examine to one's heart's content.